Lieutenant Emily Carter stepped off the shuttle bus, her boots clicking firmly on the gravel path leading into the sprawling Marine base. The morning air was sharp with the scent of diesel and freshly oiled machinery, carrying with it a sense of precision and discipline that seemed almost tangible. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag and took a slow, steadying breath. This was it, her first day at one of the most demanding U.S. Marine bases in the country. Every Marine she had met so far spoke in terms of excellence, resilience, and adherence to the chain of command. Emily knew she was entering a world where weakness was not tolerated, and where courage and resolve were the only currencies that mattered. The mess hall loomed ahead, a cavernous structure filled with long metal tables and rows of stainless steel trays. Through the large windows, she could see Marines moving with efficiency and purpose, carrying trays loaded with food in a disciplined, almost ritualistic fashion. Her heart thumped, not with fear but with anticipation. She was the new girl, the rookie, and she knew the eyes of everyone would be on her, silently evaluating her posture, her gait, even the steadiness of her hands. Emily's first step inside the hall made the ambient chatter fall away just slightly. There was a momentary pause, a ripple of curiosity that passed through the room as she scanned for an empty seat. That's when she saw him, Sergeant Ryan Maddox. Broad-shouldered, with a square jaw and a stare that could make a recruit feel like they were under interrogation, he leaned casually against the counter, idly observing the room. Maddox had been at the base for years and had built a reputation as someone who enjoyed asserting dominance over new recruits. He smiled, not warmly, but with the kind of smirk that made anyone in his path feel an instant weight of scrutiny. Emily felt his eyes land on her. She didn't flinch. Her training had taught her to hold her ground, to project calm and confidence even under intimidation. She adjusted the strap on her bag again, squared her shoulders, and moved toward the nearest table. Every step she took was deliberate, measured. The other Marines at the table noticed the newcomer, and a few shifted slightly to make room. Some offered polite nods, others just watched, curious to see how this encounter would unfold. Maddox's smirk widened. He took a step forward, his boots echoing ominously on the polished floor. Well, he said, his voice carrying across the hall, look what we have here. The new girl finally decides to show up. A few Marines chuckled quietly, but most simply looked away, sensing that this was the beginning of one of Maddox's usual displays. Emily placed her tray carefully on the table. She chose a seat at the end, allowing herself to observe rather than immediately engage. She kept her gaze steady, meeting his eyes without a flicker of fear. "Good morning, Sergeant Maddox," she said evenly, her voice calm but firm. The words were simple, but the tone carried quiet authority, a subtle assertion that she was not here to be intimidated. Maddox's eyebrows shot up, a flicker of surprise crossing his otherwise impassive face. He wasn't used to new recruits responding to him with composure. He leaned back slightly, trying to reassert control. "Morning," he replied, his smirk returning, though less assured than before. He leaned in just a bit, his presence looming like a shadow casting itself over her table. "Don't tell me you're expecting this place to be a friendly welcome," he said. "Around here, you either adapt fast or you're gone." Emily picked up her fork, sliding a small piece of scrambled egg onto it, and chewed deliberately. She didn't reply immediately. Silence, brief and weighted, hung in the air. The other Marines at the table glanced nervously between the two of them. A few exchanged quiet whispers, sensing that a small but significant confrontation was unfolding. Emily finally spoke, her voice steady and unwavering. "I know what to expect. I'm ready." Her words were concise, but her tone carried a quiet confidence that made several Marines in the hall glance at Maddox with curiosity. Maddox's smirk faltered slightly. He had expected fear, hesitation, or at least a sign of deference. Instead, he found composure, even in the eyes of someone fresh out of training. This wasn't the usual rookie who would stumble under scrutiny or flinch at a glare. Emily sat there, poised, calm, and unshakable. Maddox's pride bristled against the invisible barrier she had erected with nothing more than a measured voice and steady gaze. Emily noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere around them. A few Marines near the back of the hall had begun to whisper, leaning slightly toward each other, exchanging glances that suggested admiration, surprise, or perhaps relief. She could sense the small stir of support forming quietly, even if it hadn't yet crystallized into action. Her eyes flicked once more to Maddox, reading the slight tension around his shoulders and jaw. She realized that she had already gained an important advantage. She had forced him to reveal that his confidence could be shaken. Captain James Holloway stood near the entrance, watching the interaction without drawing attention to himself. Known for his keen ability to read the room and his unwavering enforcement of discipline, Holloway observed quietly, noting Maddox's posture and behavior. Emily's calm, composed presence did not go unnoticed. He made a silent note of the scene unfolding, a new recruit demonstrating resilience under pressure, contrasted sharply with a seasoned Marine relying on intimidation. Emily's first few bites of breakfast were methodical, precise, almost ritualistic. Every motion was deliberate, a subtle assertion of control. Maddox watched her with a mixture of irritation and fascination, his usual swagger faltering slightly. Around the mess hall, whispers continued, and eyes followed the small drama playing out at the end of a long metal table. The air was thick with tension and anticipation, signaling the start of what would become a defining moment for both the new girl and the Marine who thought he ruled the room. By the time Emily finished her first course, it was clear. This was not going to be a simple lunch. This encounter was more than a test of social hierarchy. It was the first stage of a subtle psychological battle, one that would expose arrogance, test courage, and ultimately reveal that true authority and respect are earned, not imposed. For Emily Carter, this was just the beginning, and she had already made her first, powerful statement. She would not be intimidated. The hum of the mess hall continued around them, but at Emily Carter's table, time seemed to slow. Sergeant Ryan Maddox leaned closer, the shadow of his broad frame falling across her tray. "So, rookie," he began, voice low but laced with mockery, "think you can survive here without crying after your first week?" Laughter bubbled quietly from the surrounding Marines, though most looked away, uncomfortable with the intensity of his bullying. Emily met his gaze steadily, chewing slowly on her eggs, refusing to show any reaction. She had learned early in training that fear and hesitation could be weaponized against a Marine. The quiet strength she carried, calm and unflinching, made Maddox uneasy. He wasn't used to resistance. Usually, the new recruits cowered, mumbled apologies, or tried desperately to avoid his attention. But Emily was neither apologetic nor intimidated. She finished her bite, placed her fork down, and said in a controlled tone, "I'm fine, Sergeant. Thank you for your concern." Maddox blinked, taken aback by her poise. Most would have faltered under even a fraction of the attention she was receiving, yet she maintained composure, almost daring him to escalate. His grin faltered slightly, but he quickly masked it with a sarcastic chuckle. "Concern? Ha, this isn't some tea party, rookie. You've got to be tougher than this place or you'll get eaten alive." He nudged her tray with the edge of his elbow, a deliberate jolt meant to unsettle her. Emily ignored the nudge. Instead, she subtly shifted her tray back into place, demonstrating a small but deliberate act of control. Maddox's eyes narrowed. He hadn't anticipated that she could maintain composure while under direct provocation. Around them, the room's tension was noticeable. Some Marines shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the familiar pattern. Maddox's intimidation tactics, which often went unchecked, had encountered a wall. Emily's calm presence made even casual observers hold their breath, wondering how far the confrontation would go. "You know," Maddox continued, leaning even closer, lowering his voice to a menacing whisper, "most rookies are grateful to survive one day without making a fool of themselves. You think you're special." The words were intended to humiliate, to provoke a reaction. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line, yet her eyes remained steady. She understood the dynamic. Maddox thrived on eliciting fear, on breaking the morale of those who had not yet learned the harsh realities of Marine life. Instead of shrinking, Emily responded with a quiet firmness that made several nearby Marines glance up. "I know what to expect, Sergeant. I'm ready." Her voice was calm, but the conviction behind it resonated with authority. Even those who didn't know her personally felt the weight of her words. Maddox's smirk tightened. This wasn't a compliant rookie. This was a Marine who understood her own strength and the principles of respect and resilience. Around the mess hall, whispers circulated. A few recruits nudged each other, eyes flicking between Emily and Maddox. Some were impressed, others simply relieved that someone was standing up to the notorious bully. Maddox, however, did not notice the subtle ripple of attention forming against him. His focus remained fixed on Emily, attempting to reassert dominance in the only way he knew, through intimidation. "Careful where you put your tray," Maddox warned, slamming his hand down near hers, making the metal clang. "You don't want to make a mistake you'll regret." Emily's expression remained neutral. Slowly, deliberately, she slid the tray slightly away from him, reclaiming personal space. The action was small, almost imperceptible, but it carried a message. She would not yield her ground. Maddox's face flushed with frustration. He had underestimated the new recruit. Emily's poise, calm reasoning, and subtle confidence were eroding the psychological advantage he thought he held over every rookie. He had always relied on fear and spectacle, mocking, intimidating, dominating. But against Emily, these tools were losing power. The room's atmosphere shifted. Some Marines straightened slightly in their chairs, quietly rooting for her. Captain James Holloway, still observing from the hall's edge, noticed every detail. His keen eyes tracked Maddox's movements and posture, cataloging the subtle micro-expressions that betrayed irritation. He made a mental note. Emily wasn't just a rookie. She had presence, discipline, and a mental toughness that many Marines lacked even after years of service. Holloway's intuition told him that this encounter, though small, could become a pivotal moment, a test of character, not just for Emily but for Maddox as well. Maddox tried one more tactic, leaning in so close that his shadow darkened half of Emily's tray. "Listen, rookie, this isn't high school. Out here you either dominate or you get eaten alive. And trust me, I've seen plenty of rookies try to act brave and fail spectacularly." Emily lifted her eyes to meet his once again, her calm gaze unwavering. "I understand the stakes, Sergeant. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to do my job and earn my place." For the first time that morning, Maddox hesitated. His usual arsenal of intimidation, the smirk, the laughter, the subtle threats, seemed insufficient. The crowd sensed it, too. Marines who had glanced away now watched, riveted by the silent duel of wills unfolding. Emily's measured responses and unwavering composure created an atmosphere of suspense. The bully, who had once ruled with fear, was beginning to lose control. Minutes passed. Emily ate slowly, deliberately, asserting her calm through motion alone. Maddox's jaw clenched and he muttered under his breath, though loud enough for her to hear, "I can't believe this rookie." Her eyes remained steady, meeting his with quiet determination. Around the room, tension thickened, like a coiled spring ready to snap. Everyone watching knew something significant had shifted. The new girl wasn't just surviving, she was challenging the status quo. By the time Emily finished her first course, it was clear. This was no ordinary lunch. What had begun as a typical bullying attempt had evolved into a subtle psychological battle, a test of courage, and a lesson in restraint and dignity. Maddox, despite his years of experience, had met his match. Emily's quiet authority and unwavering confidence had not only shielded her from humiliation, but had begun to erode his dominance in front of the entire mess hall. The first chapter of this confrontation had ended, but the ripple effects were only beginning to unfold. The atmosphere remained electric. Whispers among the recruits suggested awe, curiosity, and even relief that someone new had the courage to stand firm. Holloway continued his watchful observation, recognizing that Emily's resilience was not just admirable, it was exemplary. She had set the tone for her time at the base, proving in the first hour that true strength wasn't about loud intimidation or physical presence. It was about composure, confidence, and the quiet assertion of self-respect in the face of aggression. Emily's tray now empty, she pushed it gently back, a subtle acknowledgement that the interaction had ended, for now. Maddox stared, frustrated, realizing that the usual scripts of bullying no longer applied. The new girl had not only survived her first confrontation, but she had also quietly shifted the balance of power. The audience, invisible but present through the narrative tension, could sense the moment's significance. In a world built on hierarchy and intimidation, courage, poise, and integrity could disrupt even the most seasoned bully's dominance. The mess hall buzzed with activity, the clatter of trays and hum of conversation forming a steady backdrop. But at Emily Carter's table, the air had taken on a different weight, a tense energy that seemed to slow the world around her. Sergeant Ryan Maddox sat across from her, arms crossed, smirk faltering slightly under her unwavering gaze. He had tried every trick in the book: mockery, intimidation, veiled threats. But the new girl had responded with something he hadn't anticipated: calm composure, quiet confidence, and a refusal to yield. Every subtle movement Emily made reinforced her steadiness. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the mess hall, Captain James Holloway paused, surveying the scene with his sharp, discerning eyes. Holloway was known across the base for his uncanny ability to read interactions, to detect tensions that others overlooked, and to recognize moments of leadership or weakness before they became obvious. Today, his attention was immediately drawn to Maddox and Emily. Holloway's lips pressed into a thin line as he observed Maddox leaning aggressively toward Emily, attempting to dominate the conversation, his voice dripping with sarcasm and disdain. Holloway noticed the subtleties Maddox was blind to, the small flickers of discomfort in nearby Marines, the way they exchanged glances but avoided intervening directly. This wasn't just lunch. It was a display of power dynamics in action. He also observed Emily, sitting calmly, almost meditative in her composure, eating methodically, not retaliating but asserting control through her poise. Holloway's experience told him that this was a pivotal moment, one that could either expose Maddox's arrogance or allow it to persist unchecked. Maddox, oblivious to the captain's scrutiny, attempted another tactic. He leaned closer to Emily, lowering his voice into a threatening whisper. "You think you're ready for this life? One mistake and it'll eat you alive." His words were sharp, designed to unsettle. A few Marines nearby chuckled quietly, while others watched with a mix of curiosity and unease. Maddox had relied on fear and intimidation for years, but the ripple of whispers and attention indicated that Emily's quiet defiance was slowly undermining his influence. Emily looked up from her tray and met Maddox's gaze evenly. "I understand the stakes, Sergeant. I'm not here to impress anyone. I'm here to do my job, to earn my place, and to follow the standards expected of a Marine," she said, her voice calm but resolute. Her words, though simple, carried weight. The surrounding Marines noticed the precision and confidence in her tone. Emily wasn't arguing or retaliating. She was asserting integrity, a concept that Maddox seemed to overlook entirely in his obsession with fear. Holloway's attention sharpened as he observed the subtle power shift. He made a mental note. Emily had not only survived the initial intimidation, but she had also subtly rallied the room to recognize her composure. The once dominant Maddox, who thrived on commanding attention and asserting fear, was being challenged in a way that no physical display could address. Holloway knew that the base's disciplinary protocols, combined with Emily's mental resilience, were setting the stage for accountability. Maddox's frustration grew as he noticed the whispers and sideways glances. His usual strategy, mocking the rookie and expecting fear in return, was failing. Each of Emily's deliberate actions, from finishing her meal methodically to maintaining eye contact, chipped away at his perceived authority. He tried to reclaim dominance, slamming his hand lightly on the edge of the table, causing a small clang. "Careful where you place your tray," he growled, a low threat intended to provoke. Emily shifted it slightly, reclaiming her space without a word, asserting control in a subtle but undeniable manner. Some of the nearby recruits had begun leaning in, silently observing, intrigued by the showdown. They could see that Emily was different from other newcomers. She had strength that went beyond physical ability, strength rooted in confidence, integrity, and mental discipline. Maddox had underestimated the impact of a calm presence in a space usually dominated by loud displays of control. The room's dynamic was changing, and even he could feel it, though he refused to acknowledge it outwardly. Holloway continued his quiet observation, noting the body language and micro-expressions of everyone in the room. Maddox's smirk had lost its certainty. The subtle stiffening of his shoulders and the twitch of his jaw betrayed the fact that he was unaccustomed to a recruit not responding predictably. Meanwhile, Emily's posture remained impeccable, her composure unwavering, a silent testament to her training and her understanding of leadership. Holloway's mind raced, considering how quickly this scenario could escalate or resolve. Maddox attempted one last verbal jab. "You think anyone going to respect you here? Respect is earned, rookie, and you're still learning." He leaned back slightly, trying to regain a semblance of dominance, but it was clear to the room and to Holloway that the effort was faltering. Emily responded with the quiet authority that had kept her steady all morning. "Respect is earned through actions and integrity, not intimidation. I intend to earn it, Sergeant, and I intend to do so with honor." The subtle exchange had shifted the room's energy. Marines who had been uneasy now began to see Emily as a figure of strength. Holloway noted the change, understanding that this was more than a rookie standing her ground. It was a demonstration of the values he hoped to instill across the base. Maddox, meanwhile, realized, however grudgingly, that he was no longer in full control. His usual arsenal of psychological dominance had met a wall, and it was a wall built not from fear but from principle. Minutes passed with the two sitting in tense silence, the cafeteria's normal rhythm continuing around them, but the focus of the room subtly realigned. Holloway finally stepped a few paces closer, careful not to interfere yet ensuring he could observe the remainder of the encounter. He could see that Emily's composure had created a ripple of accountability. Even without intervention, the dynamic had begun to change. The bully was no longer commanding the room, and the audience of Marines could sense it. Maddox's jaw clenched, frustration evident, though he tried to mask it with a forced smirk. Emily's eyes, steady and unwavering, met his without a flicker of doubt or fear. For the first time that morning, it was clear that the balance of power had shifted. Holloway's mind recorded every detail, knowing that the events unfolding in the next few moments could define both Emily's early career and Maddox's standing in the unit. By the time Emily finished her lunch, it was clear to everyone present. She had not only survived the initial intimidation, but had also subtly exposed the limitations of Maddox's authority. Her calm, disciplined demeanor had forced a shift in the room, quietly asserting her presence in a space long dominated by arrogance. Holloway's observation confirmed it. Emily's resilience was extraordinary, and Maddox had unwittingly laid the groundwork for his own undoing. The tension lingered even as trays were cleared and the buzz of conversation returned. Whispered glances, subtle nods, and quiet murmurs filled the air. Emily had earned attention, respect, and perhaps the silent admiration of those who had never believed a rookie could stand so firmly against a seasoned bully. Maddox, meanwhile, sat rigid, aware that his usual tactics were ineffective, though he had yet to fully comprehend the implications. The stage was set for what Holloway recognized as an inevitable confrontation, one that would test principles, courage, and accountability in equal measure. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual noise of trays clattering and conversations overlapping. Yet at Emily Carter's table, an invisible tension hung thick in the air. Sergeant Ryan Maddox sat rigid, his eyes darting from Emily to the room around them, realizing that the usual dynamic had shifted. He had relied on fear, intimidation, and loud displays of authority to command respect, but this rookie refused to flinch. Each measured movement, each deliberate breath she took seemed to echo louder than the cafeteria's ambient sounds. Maddox's frustration grew as he leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "You think this is a game, rookie? Out here, one misstep and it's over. One mistake and the higher-ups eat you alive." He slammed a hand lightly on the table, sending a jolt through her tray. Emily's gaze never wavered. Calmly, deliberately, she slid her tray slightly back, reclaiming her space without a word. The action was small, almost imperceptible, but powerful, an assertion of control in the silent language of discipline. Around them, whispers spread like wildfire. Some Marines shifted uneasily, caught between loyalty to Maddox and fascination with Emily's composure. The more Maddox tried to dominate, the more the room began to notice his faltering control. A few recruits dared to glance up from their meals, their expressions betraying a mix of awe and silent encouragement. Emily's confidence, quiet but undeniable, began to change the energy of the space. Captain James Holloway remained at the periphery, observing every micro-expression, every shift in posture. Maddox's smirk, once confident and predatory, had become forced, tight, and strained. Holloway could see the subtle signs of frustration, clenched fists resting on the table, a jaw tightening, eyes flickering with irritation. Emily, by contrast, remained a picture of composure, her movements precise, almost meditative as she finished her meal. Her restraint made her strength unmistakable, and Holloway's experienced eye recognized that this was a turning point. Maddox's tactics escalated. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only Emily could hear. "Don't get cocky, rookie. You haven't seen what this place is capable of. One slip and everything you've worked for disappears." Emily's response was measured, calm, but filled with a quiet authority that made his words nearly powerless. "I understand the challenges, Sergeant. I'm here to face them, and I intend to do so with integrity and focus." The subtle defiance in her voice sent a ripple through the room. Marines who had been silently observing straightened in their seats, drawn to her quiet resilience. Maddox's irritation was mounting. He had expected fear, hesitation, or at least uncertainty, but Emily had none of these traits. His usual arsenal, intimidation, mockery, and aggressive presence, was failing against a recruit who understood her own strength and the principles that governed conduct on a Marine base. Emily's eyes flicked briefly toward Captain Holloway, whose presence at the edge of the room was subtle but undeniable. Holloway's keen gaze assessed the situation, noting the shift in dynamics. Maddox, despite his years of experience, had met an obstacle in the form of quiet courage and mental discipline. Holloway's mind cataloged the scene meticulously. This wasn't just a rookie standing up. This was a display of leadership potential under pressure. Maddox tried one last attempt to regain control. He slammed his fist on the table, sending the cafeteria tray rattling again. "You think you're ready? You're just a kid pretending to know what toughness looks like." His voice carried, and some nearby Marines flinched instinctively. But Emily's calm demeanor remained unshaken. Slowly, deliberately, she set down her fork and met his gaze evenly. "Toughness isn't shown through aggression, Sergeant. It's demonstrated through integrity, composure, and respect. I intend to show all three." The room was silent, save for the distant clatter of trays and the low hum of conversation at other tables. The tension was palpable, electric, almost tangible. Every Marine present seemed to hold their breath, witnessing a psychological duel that transcended ordinary cafeteria banter. Emily's poise was magnetic. Her quiet authority drew attention and respect even from those who had never spoken to her before. Maddox's face reddened with frustration. He had underestimated her, and now the consequences were visible to everyone around. Whispers circulated among nearby Marines, small murmurs of admiration for Emily's courage. She had not only withstood his bullying, but she had subtly shifted the balance of power in the room. The bully's influence was faltering, and it was clear that the dynamic would not easily return to its previous state. Captain Holloway's sharp eyes noted every detail. He observed Maddox's tightening jaw, the flicker of irritation in his eyes, and the small but telling shifts in posture. Holloway recognized that Emily's measured behavior was undermining Maddox's authority in a way that no amount of yelling or physical intimidation could counteract. The subtle psychological advantage had shifted toward Emily, and the ripple effects were evident in the room's atmosphere. Emily's calmness became an unspoken challenge. Each subtle gesture, from the deliberate way she pushed her tray back into place to the steady way she held her fork, demonstrated her self-control and unwavering presence. Maddox's usual tools, sarcasm, threats, dominance, were powerless against a recruit who understood the unspoken codes of military respect. The room, once tense with fear of the bully, now pulsed with anticipation and quiet admiration for Emily's resilience. Minutes passed. The cafeteria's normal rhythm continued, but at Emily's table the psychological duel remained unresolved. Maddox's frustration grew, almost visibly, as he realized that his usual strategies were ineffective. Meanwhile, Emily continued to eat slowly, deliberately, maintaining her composure. The room's observers could feel the shift. The bully was no longer commanding attention, and the new recruit had subtly claimed the moral and psychological upper hand. By the time the lunch period ended, it was clear that this encounter was more than a simple clash of personalities. It was a lesson in courage, self-control, and integrity, unfolding in the middle of a bustling mess hall. Emily had demonstrated, without raising her voice or lashing out, that respect could be commanded through poise and principle rather than fear and intimidation. Maddox, now acutely aware that his dominance was slipping, seethed quietly, realizing that this confrontation was far from over, and that the consequences of underestimating the new girl could be severe. The lunch hour was drawing to a close, yet the tension at Emily Carter's table remained thick, almost suffocating. Sergeant Ryan Maddox sat stiffly, fists clenched beneath the table, his frustration barely contained. His attempts at intimidation, mocking words, deliberate nudges, and the occasional slam of his hand had failed to unsettle Emily. She remained calm, composed, and observant, eating deliberately and meeting his gaze without hesitation. Every subtle motion, every measured breath, was a quiet assertion of control that Maddox had not anticipated. Around them, whispers and sideways glances rippled through the other Marines, signaling a shift in the cafeteria's unspoken hierarchy. Captain James Holloway, positioned near the entrance, observed the ongoing standoff with keen interest. The scene had shifted since his initial arrival. Maddox's usual dominance had begun to falter, while Emily's composure had turned attention in her favor. Holloway's sharp eyes noted every detail: Maddox's clenched jaw, the narrowing of his eyes, the subtle tension in his shoulders. Emily's posture, in contrast, remained steady, upright, and controlled. Her confidence and poise conveyed not arrogance, but self-assurance and principle. Holloway recognized that this moment would not pass without consequence. What Maddox didn't realize was that the security cameras, positioned unobtrusively above the cafeteria, were recording every movement, every word. The system automatically flagged aggressive behavior, particularly when directed at new recruits. Moments earlier, the subtle but persistent bullying by Maddox had triggered an alert. Holloway, already present, had noted the incident in real time. Within minutes, the footage would be reviewed by the base's commanding officers, leaving Maddox unaware that his arrogance was being documented for formal review. The stage for accountability had been set. Maddox leaned closer, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. "You think you're tough, rookie. You haven't seen what we do to recruits who step out of line." Emily continued eating, her gaze steady, her hands controlled. She did not flinch, did not respond with sarcasm or argument. Instead, she met his eyes calmly. "I know the standards, Sergeant. I intend to meet them, not through intimidation, but through discipline and dedication." Her words, simple yet resolute, landed with quiet authority. Nearby Marines shifted slightly, impressed by her clarity and courage. Holloway's mind cataloged the exchange carefully. Maddox, despite years of experience, was being challenged in a way he was ill-prepared to respond to. Emily's calm confidence had turned what might have been a routine act of bullying into a demonstration of integrity. The subtle psychological shift was clear. Maddox's control had weakened, and the room's attention had quietly gravitated toward Emily. The stage was set for a turning point, one that would soon have immediate consequences for the arrogant sergeant. At that moment, A junior officer arrived to review the security feed triggered by the camera system. The officer quickly replayed the video, showing Maddox leaning aggressively toward Emily, mocking her and attempting to intimidate her physically. The evidence was clear, unambiguous, and damning. Holloway stepped forward, observing Maddox's movements carefully while maintaining the illusion of casual oversight. Maddox, still unaware of the recording's impact, continued his posturing, assuming his dominance remained intact. Finally, Holloway cleared his throat, a subtle but commanding sound that caught Maddox off guard. "Sergeant Maddox, step aside," he said, his voice calm but firm. The words sliced through the tension of the room like a knife. Maddox froze, eyes widening slightly. He had expected confrontation from a superior at some point, but not at this exact moment, not in this setting, and certainly not with evidence documenting his repeated harassment. The room's whispers intensified as Marines glanced toward Holloway, sensing that the confrontation was about to escalate. Emily remained seated, finishing her lunch calmly, her composure unbroken. Her movements were deliberate, each bite a subtle reminder that she was in control of herself, if not the bully. Maddox's usual smug confidence wavered. The subtle power dynamic had shifted dramatically. Holloway gestured toward the video feed, replaying key moments for the room to observe. Maddox's jaw tightened as he watched his own arrogance displayed in stark clarity. The humor, intimidation, and mockery that he had relied on were now undeniable evidence of misconduct. The atmosphere in the cafeteria shifted palpably. Marines who had previously looked away now leaned in, witnessing a pivotal moment of accountability. Emily's quiet strength, combined with Maddox's exposed arrogance, created a charged energy in the room. Holloway's calm observation, paired with the damning video evidence, ensured that Maddox could no longer manipulate the narrative. His usual control over the room, over new recruits, and even over the casual observers of the mess hall had dissolved entirely. Maddox attempted to speak, to rationalize, but Holloway's firm gaze silenced him. "Sergeant Maddox," Holloway said evenly, "the behavior documented here is unacceptable. You will explain yourself to the commanding officer immediately. This is not a matter of opinion, it is a matter of record." The words hit Maddox like a shockwave. He realized with growing alarm that the balance of power had shifted irreversibly. Emily's quiet composure had forced the situation into the hands of authority. Emily remained composed, her actions speaking louder than any words could. She had not sought confrontation. She had not sought revenge. Instead, she had relied on principle, patience, and quiet confidence. Her poise had not only protected her dignity but had exposed the flaws in Maddox's authority for everyone to see. The other Marines in the cafeteria, many of whom had previously feared Maddox's bullying, now quietly acknowledged her strength. Whispers of admiration and respect spread subtly through the room. Minutes later, Maddox stood silently, constrained by both authority and the undeniable evidence before him. His arrogance, once unchecked, had been thoroughly undermined. Holloway's presence, paired with the video footage, ensured that accountability was unavoidable. Emily's quiet courage had turned a tense lunch into a turning point that would affect Maddox's career, her reputation, and the moral tone of the unit. The ripple effects were just beginning. By the time the lunch hour ended, Emily had finished her meal without incident. Maddox, however, felt the weight of impending consequences pressing down on him. He had miscalculated, underestimated a rookie, and now faced the certainty that his usual tactics could not protect him. Holloway remained near the edge of the room, observing the reactions of the surrounding Marines, recognizing the shift in authority, respect, and morale. The turning point had arrived, and it was irreversible. The atmosphere in the cafeteria had changed permanently. Where Maddox had once dominated through fear, now respect, integrity, and composure had claimed the center stage. Emily's actions had not only protected herself, but had set an example for everyone present. The ripple effects of this encounter would extend far beyond a single lunch period, signaling that even the most entrenched bully could face accountability when confronted by courage, principle, and calm determination. The tension following lunch lingered like a heavy fog across the base. Sergeant Ryan Maddox had retreated to his office, though retreat was hardly voluntary. It was a forced separation from the cafeteria, from the evidence now in the hands of command. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by an uneasy stiffness, a rigid posture that betrayed his growing apprehension. The security footage, already reviewed by Captain Holloway, had been flagged for the commanding officer. Maddox knew without being told that this was serious. He had underestimated the rookie, and now the consequences were coming fast. Emily Carter returned to her duties with quiet professionalism, her composure intact. She walked past Maddox's office, noticing him packing behind a closed door. Her gaze remained steady but empathetic. She had not sought to humiliate him. She had only stood firm in her own integrity. The other Marines in the hall noticed the tension radiating from his office. Rumors and whispers began to circulate. Everyone had seen the video. Everyone knew Maddox had crossed a line, and no one was surprised when Holloway quietly summoned the commanding officer for a formal review. By mid-afternoon, Maddox was called into the office of Colonel Jonathan Reynolds, a seasoned officer with decades of experience in leadership and discipline. Colonel Reynolds wasted no time. "Sergeant Maddox," he began, voice calm but sharp, "you've been observed intimidating a new recruit in the cafeteria today. Video evidence confirms multiple instances of harassment, physical intimidation, and attempts to assert dominance through fear. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Maddox opened his mouth to speak, but his usual rehearsed arrogance faltered. He hesitated, realizing that his excuses would hold little weight against documented evidence. I was just maintaining discipline," he stammered, his voice lacking conviction. Colonel Reynolds raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Maintaining discipline does not include threats, physical intimidation, or verbal harassment. The footage is clear, and multiple witnesses have provided corroborating statements. You will answer for your actions." Meanwhile, Emily observed from the doorway, summoned as a witness. She remained composed, her hands clasped lightly in front of her. "Sir," she said respectfully, "I've answered the questions asked of me and have provided a factual account of what happened. My goal was to remain professional, maintain composure, and uphold the standards expected of all Marines." Her tone was calm, precise, and free of any personal vendetta. Even the colonel noted her poise, a rare trait that signaled maturity beyond her rank. Maddox's confidence had eroded entirely. He realized that the cafeteria, once his domain, had become the scene of his unraveling. The room seemed smaller, more constricted, as he faced the undeniable truth. Emily's quiet strength, combined with the indisputable video evidence, had cornered him. Every tactic he had relied upon for years, sarcasm, intimidation, displays of physical presence, had failed spectacularly. For the first time, he truly understood the weight of accountability. Colonel Reynolds continued, "Sergeant Maddox, this is not just a reprimand. Depending on the review of this incident and your service record, your actions could result in loss of rank, removal from your unit, or even discharge. Do you understand the severity?" Maddox swallowed hard, beads of sweat forming at his temple. "Yes, sir," he muttered, voice barely audible. The gravity of the situation was unmistakable, and the ripple effects were immediate. Emily's presence remained calm and unobtrusive. She had not sought to escalate the situation, but her actions and professionalism had forced accountability. Her colleagues observed quietly, sensing a lesson being taught without drama or spectacle. For the other recruits, it was a rare, instructive moment. Integrity, composure, and adherence to standards mattered more than intimidation or posturing. Emily had demonstrated leadership in the most subtle but powerful way possible, through action, not aggression. The investigation proceeded swiftly. Interviews were conducted with nearby Marines, who confirmed Maddox's intimidation and harassment. The video footage reinforced every account, leaving no room for doubt. Even senior officers who had known Maddox's reputation for years were taken aback by the clear and undeniable evidence of misconduct. For the first time in a long time, Maddox faced scrutiny that could not be deflected by charm, threats, or past achievements. The psychological pressure mounted with each passing hour. Maddox attempted to defend himself during interviews, claiming he was enforcing discipline, but the words rang hollow against the calm testimonies of Emily and the other witnesses. "Discipline doesn't require intimidation or fear," one Marine stated plainly. "We respect leaders who lead by example, not by bullying. That's what she did, and that's why we all noticed." Each statement, precise and factual, chipped away at Maddox's credibility and authority. By late afternoon, Colonel Reynolds convened the final review. Maddox sat with visible tension, hands clenched, jaw tight. "Sergeant," the colonel said firmly, "the evidence is overwhelming. Your behavior is unacceptable, unbecoming of a Marine of your rank, and violates the standards we uphold. You will face formal disciplinary action." Maddox's shoulders slumped slightly, a rare moment of humility forced by circumstance. The cafeteria confrontation, once trivial in his mind, had become a pivotal moment threatening his career. Emily was dismissed with a nod, having fulfilled her role in the investigation. Her composure remained unshaken, but her quiet impact was evident. Maddox had learned the cost of arrogance, while the other Marines observed the consequences of misconduct in real time. Captain Holloway and Colonel Reynolds ensured that the lesson was clear. Integrity, professionalism, and calm courage could dismantle intimidation, even from those who thought themselves untouchable. By the end of the day, word had spread through the unit. Maddox's colleagues were aware that a formal investigation had taken place, and the atmosphere shifted. Respect for Emily grew, not through overt recognition, but through quiet admiration for her ability to stand firm and maintain professionalism under pressure. Maddox, once feared, had been stripped of his perceived dominance, confronted by both principle and accountability. The events of the day sent ripples through the unit, teaching lessons far beyond the cafeteria. Leadership, Holloway knew, was tested not only in battle but in moments of moral courage and personal integrity. Emily's actions had exemplified the best of what a Marine could be, while Maddox's arrogance had ensured that his misconduct would not go unnoticed. The stage was set for the next chapter: consequences for Maddox, recognition for Emily, and a shift in morale and culture that would resonate across the base. The ripple effects of courage, integrity, and accountability had begun, and there was no turning back. The following morning, the base was abuzz with subtle tension. Word of the cafeteria incident had spread quietly among the Marines. Those who had witnessed Emily Carter's calm defiance and Sergeant Ryan Maddox's unraveling in front of Captain Holloway and Colonel Reynolds spoke in hushed tones, sharing observations and opinions. Though formal actions were pending, it was clear that Maddox's reputation had taken a hit. Whispers of his misconduct circled like smoke, reaching even those who had not seen the lunch confrontation firsthand. The shift in perception was palpable, and no amount of posturing could mask it. Maddox himself was acutely aware of the growing scrutiny. He walked the base with a tense posture, every movement measured and cautious. His usual swagger, once effortless and intimidating, was replaced with a rigid stiffness. Even the simplest interactions with colleagues were now awkward. Marines who had previously deferred to him with fear or respect now approached cautiously, some openly avoiding him. Each glance, each sideways whisper, reminded him of the evidence that had been documented: the cafeteria videos, eyewitness accounts, and Holloway's stern oversight. Emily, on the other hand, continued her duties with the quiet professionalism that had characterized her first days at the base. She moved through the halls with steady purpose, acknowledging colleagues politely, but never seeking recognition. Yet, subtle signs of respect followed her wherever she went. Recruits who had once whispered nervously in Maddox's presence now looked to her for guidance, impressed by her courage and composure. Emily's quiet leadership had begun to influence the morale and culture of the unit, setting an example of dignity and integrity. The formal review proceeded in the afternoon. Colonel Reynolds and Captain Holloway convened with Maddox, presenting the video footage once more and reviewing the statements collected from witnesses. Maddox, seated across from the two officers, fidgeted slightly, hands clenched and jaw tight. The commanding officer's voice was calm but firm. "Sergeant Maddox, your actions during lunch yesterday were inappropriate, unbecoming of your rank, and violated the standards expected of every Marine. The evidence is clear, and the witnesses corroborate the incident. Do you understand the seriousness of this situation?" Maddox swallowed hard. "Yes, sir," he muttered, his usual confidence absent. He had anticipated minor reprimands before, a few sharp words or corrective measures, but not the combination of public scrutiny, documented evidence, and official review that now confronted him. For the first time, he felt the weight of consequences pressing down fully. Holloway and Reynolds exchanged a brief glance, both nodding that the psychological unraveling of a seasoned sergeant was underway. The disciplinary outcome was deliberate. Maddox would face a reduction in rank and reassignment, a formal reprimand added to his service record. In addition, mandatory counseling and leadership retraining were ordered. The message was clear: intimidation and bullying were unacceptable, regardless of experience or prior reputation. Emily's role, by contrast, was acknowledged internally, not through overt fanfare, but through recognition of her composure, professionalism, and the way she had upheld Marine standards under pressure. Maddox's colleagues observed the fallout with a mixture of curiosity and relief. The once feared sergeant, known for his harsh treatment of recruits, was now publicly accountable for his actions. The ripple effects extended beyond the cafeteria. Respect for Emily's quiet leadership grew daily. Those who had been intimidated into silence now saw a model of integrity, courage, and resilience. Emily had not sought personal gain or retribution. Her actions were principled, disciplined, and consistent with the values taught at the base. In the following days, Maddox's reassignment became public knowledge. He was moved to a different unit, stripped of certain responsibilities, and placed under close supervision. The humiliation was compounded by the fact that his actions had been widely observed and corroborated, leaving little room for mitigation. Emily, meanwhile, continued her duties with steady composure. Her colleagues increasingly sought her advice and guidance, appreciating her calm judgment and ability to navigate high-pressure situations without ego or arrogance. Captain Holloway took steps to ensure that the broader lesson was clear. In meetings and briefings, he emphasized the importance of integrity, respect, and leadership through example. The cafeteria incident was discussed in abstract terms, focusing on the principles demonstrated rather than the personalities involved. The message resonated. True leadership was rooted in courage, composure, and integrity, not fear or intimidation. Emily's actions became a reference point for new recruits, illustrating how resilience and principle could influence not just personal outcomes, but unit culture as well. Maddox, isolated and frustrated, struggled to rebuild his reputation. His previous dominance had been challenged, his credibility eroded, and the respect he once commanded had shifted subtly but irreversibly. Colleagues who had once feared him now watched cautiously, measuring interactions carefully. Every misstep or sign of arrogance risked further scrutiny. The cafeteria confrontation, initially a momentary encounter, had transformed into a defining moment for his career, signaling the consequences of unchecked bullying and arrogance. Emily's impact extended quietly yet profoundly. She had not sought recognition, but her composure and adherence to principles had created a lasting impression. Recruits and junior Marines now approached their roles with a heightened awareness of integrity and personal accountability. The culture within the unit began to shift subtly. Intimidation lost its power, and respect earned through principle became more visible. Holloway observed this with satisfaction, understanding that small moments of courage could have far-reaching consequences. By the end of the week, the cafeteria incident had become more than a story. It was a symbol. Maddox's fall from authority and Emily's rise in respect illustrated the principles that govern life at the base. Accountability, courage, and integrity could shape outcomes far more than rank or intimidation ever could. Emily had proven that even the most entrenched hierarchies could be challenged through composure and principle. The ripple effects were clear. Maddox's career trajectory had shifted, the unit's culture had evolved, and Emily had emerged not only unscathed but respected. Her quiet leadership, demonstrated through resilience and integrity, had reshaped perceptions and set a precedent. The lesson was universal within the base. True strength was measured not by intimidation, but by courage, professionalism, and the willingness to stand firm in the face of bullying. By the following week, the atmosphere on the base had shifted dramatically. Sergeant Ryan Maddox, once feared for his domineering presence, now walked with the weight of scrutiny and consequence pressing on him. The cafeteria incident had become more than a single confrontation. It had become a defining moment in his career. His reassignment to a different unit, the formal reprimand in his file, and the mandatory retraining served as stark reminders that intimidation and bullying carried consequences, even for seasoned Marines. The ripple effect was clear. No one was above accountability, not even those who had previously commanded respect through fear. Emily Carter, meanwhile, continued her duties with quiet dignity. She did not seek recognition or reward, but the respect she had earned was unmistakable. Recruits who had once whispered nervously at the mere mention of Maddox now approached her with confidence, asking questions, seeking guidance, and observing her disciplined, calm approach. Emily's leadership was subtle but profound. She had demonstrated that integrity and composure could influence outcomes far more than loud displays of authority. The moral tone of the unit had shifted, and her example became a reference point for new recruits and seasoned Marines alike. The base leadership took note. Captain James Holloway, observing the impact of the incident, called Emily into his office for a private discussion. "Marine Carter," he began, his tone measured and respectful, "what you demonstrated in the cafeteria was more than courage, it was leadership. You stood firm, adhered to standards, and maintained your composure under pressure. That is the mark of a true Marine." Emily remained composed, standing at attention, acknowledging the praise with a quiet "Thank you, sir." Holloway's recognition, understated yet sincere, reinforced her example and cemented her growing reputation on the base. Maddox's situation continued to deteriorate. Word of the formal investigation had spread across multiple units, and his colleagues now viewed him with a mixture of pity and quiet judgment. Marines who had previously feared him now observed him cautiously, their respect eroded by his documented misconduct. Attempts to reassert authority were met with subtle resistance. His credibility, once solid, had crumbled. The cafeteria confrontation had exposed vulnerabilities that no experience or rank could hide. For Maddox, every interaction became a reminder of the consequences of underestimating a quiet, disciplined opponent. Meanwhile, Emily's influence extended beyond simple respect. Training sessions and briefings began to incorporate examples of integrity, composure, and accountability, using her actions as a case study. Instructors highlighted how a calm, principled approach could resolve conflicts and influence outcomes without aggression. Recruits observed her as a model of professionalism, noting how resilience and self-discipline could shift the dynamics of authority and respect. Emily had not sought attention, but her actions had inspired tangible change in the culture of the unit. One afternoon, during a formal base meeting, Colonel Jonathan Reynolds addressed the assembled Marines. The incident with Sergeant Maddox and Marine Carter is a reminder to all of us that leadership is not about fear or intimidation. It is about integrity, discipline, and respect. Marine Carter demonstrated those qualities under pressure, and we can all learn from her example. Sergeant Maddox will continue to receive guidance and supervision, but this event serves as a lesson. Accountability matters and principle prevails. The words echoed across the room, a clear endorsement of Emily's composure and a cautionary note for Maddox and others alike. Maddox, sitting quietly at his reassigned post, could not escape the awareness that his career trajectory had been irrevocably altered. The arrogance that had defined him was replaced by unease and reflection. He had underestimated Emily Carter, dismissed her composure, and relied on fear as a tool of control. The consequences were immediate and visible. His authority diminished, his reputation tarnished, and his career path redirected. The cafeteria incident had become a turning point, demonstrating that even entrenched hierarchies could be challenged when courage, integrity, and composure prevailed. Emily, on the other hand, continued to excel quietly. She maintained her duties with precision and calm, her presence a steadying influence on her peers. Marines sought her advice, not only for practical guidance but also for reassurance in high-pressure situations. Emily's reputation grew organically, rooted in actions rather than words, in principle rather than aggression. Her example became a benchmark for professionalism, illustrating that leadership could be exercised through poise, integrity, and quiet confidence. In the weeks that followed, the base's culture subtly but unmistakably shifted. Intimidation lost its power, replaced by an emphasis on accountability and respect. Recruits observed how courage and principle could influence outcomes, while seasoned Marines noted how the authority of rank could be challenged when misused. Emily's actions had catalyzed a change that extended far beyond a single confrontation. She had demonstrated that true leadership was not about fear. It was about the consistent application of values, even under pressure. By the end of her first month, Emily Carter had established herself as a quiet but influential presence within the unit. Sergeant Ryan Maddox had accepted his reassignment and retraining, aware that his previous methods were no longer effective and that his career now required careful navigation. The cafeteria confrontation had become more than an incident. It was a defining moment in the lives of both Marines involved. One had faltered under accountability, the other had risen through principle. The final lesson of the incident was clear to everyone who witnessed or learned of it. Leadership and respect were earned through courage, integrity, and composure, not intimidation. Emily Carter had embodied these qualities in a way that left a lasting impact, shaping both the morale and culture of the unit. Maddox's downfall served as a cautionary tale, reinforcing that no Marine was above accountability, and that even the smallest acts of courage could change the course of a career. As the sun set over the base, Emily walked across the parade grounds, her posture upright, her demeanor calm. She had faced intimidation, stood firm under scrutiny, and emerged not only unscathed but respected. Around her, Marines observed quietly, their perception shifted, their respect earned, not through force but through integrity. The incident in the cafeteria, once a moment of tension and potential humiliation, had become a story of courage, accountability, and the enduring power of principle. In the end, Emily Carter had not just survived her first real test, she had redefined what leadership meant to those who witnessed it, leaving a legacy that would resonate far beyond the walls of the mess hall. Sergeant Ryan Maddox had learned a hard truth: arrogance and intimidation could crumble in the face of quiet courage. The story of that lunch, of the confrontation and its consequences, would be remembered as a turning point, a testament to the enduring power of integrity over fear.